Shus, Rabbi Gibber, Rosh Kollel, honored guests. A day or two after this honor was sprung on me, a week or two before Pesach, I was sitting in a meeting with Scott Seiler, who happens to have been last year's Kollel honoree. And I mentioned to Scott that Kollel's just pushed this honor on me, and maybe he can give me some advice as last year's honoree. So he told me that, before the dinner I prepared a speech, thought about what I wanted to say, and then I come to the dinner and they play a video. Everything I wanted to say was on the video. So he advised me, and I followed, not to prepare too much till after you hear the video. So we'll make it up as we go along. We heard a lot about, on the previous video, about the Kollel's arrival in Minneapolis. I want to go back to a little bit before that. It's true that Rabbi Gibber and Rabbi Leaf were working for more than a year before this on starting the Kollel. But for me, it began with a phone call. I was home. That was the days before cell phones. I was home, and I received a phone call. Hello, this is Lazer Goldstein. Never heard the name, had no idea who he was. Okay, I'd like to have a meeting with you. When can you come to my house? In those days, probably more than 50% of Lakewooders learned in yeshiva. I said, I learned in yeshiva. After morning, say at 2 o'clock, we could meet downstairs in the library. No, that's not the way I work. I need you to come to my house. Now, I've been known once in a while to be strong-minded, and I told him, I said, that's you'd like to meet me. I don't know who you are, and, I'm in yeshiva. You can come to my house. I was thinking about all the crazy things that happened that ended up with us moving to Minneapolis. I think this is probably the craziest of all, that I don't remember how it happened. He got me to agree to come to his house. I really can't recall. It does not make sense to me, but somehow I heard something. I agreed to come to his house. No idea who he was, what he wanted. And I come to his house, go down to the basement office, and he starts talking, and probably talked for over 2 hours about this opportunity, this new Kollel that's opening up. And it sounded a little crazy in Minneapolis. Can't say I never heard the name. We had some friends who went to see it in Minneapolis, but didn't know where it was and didn't know much about it. Okay, I went home that night, and it was really a crazy proposition. But the truth is that this is something that I never admitted even to my wife until an hour ago when I told her what I was going to say. It says, "Balayla hahu nadda shanas hamelech." At that night, I really tossed and turned and really didn't sleep that much. And I thought it over. And I didn't know much about what the proposition meant. I can't say I came to a conclusion, but I did conclude that if everything fell into place and it made sense, it was something we would consider. And again, I didn't tell my wife that. Of course, there was a lot to find out. The Rosh Yeshiva Rebellia, Zatzal, Rebellia Svei, the Rosh Yeshiva in Philadelphia, was someone who we turned to for all our issues with life. And I called him up and asked him for an appointment. He was very involved with this Kollel, very instrumental in getting it off the ground, making it happen. Rebellia was the busiest man that I knew. He said, sure, you can come. When can the Yeshiva see me? Whenever you want to come, tell me. And my wife tells me now, she didn't tell me this till today, that she was certain that I would go to Philadelphia, come back, it would be lock, stock, no, we're not going. The Yeshiva, of course, was telling me not to go. But I sat with the Rosh Yeshiva for over a couple of hours. He gave me all the time that we needed. We discussed a lot of things about out-of-town Kollel, Minneapolis in general, and specifically. I asked him that once we're considering out-of-town, why would I schlep to Minneapolis, the other end of the world? I can go to Toronto, beautiful Kollel. My in-laws live in Toronto, it would make my wife happy. I can go to Boston Kollel. My father-in-law grew up in Boston, the whole family's there. I went through almost every Kollel in the country. And every Kollel Rebellia went through with me, very interesting conversation, not for now, and talked about why that Kollel was not for me, but Minneapolis is for me. He understood. He had an uncanny ability, without ever having been here, to understand this community inside out, and to know that this was a community that was ripe and looking for growth, and what a Kollel could do for this community. He had that ability to understand that. So we're grateful to Rabbi Lazer Goldstein. We're grateful to the Rosh Yeshiva Rebellia. We're grateful for those who encouraged us. Rabbi Leaf, who brought up the idea in this community before the Kollel was ever around, and pushed it for a couple of years. My parents and in-laws, who were so encouraging, when they could have been excused probably, had they had some consternation about their children moving halfway across the country. But they encouraged and realized if this is the right thing for us, it's a good thing to do. The biggest thanks, of course, goes to my wife, my Eshes Chayil. Not only for encouraging me to move to an out-of-town kollel and coming along with me too, but for standing by my side all these years through, including the current position that I'm in as the Rav of a Kehillah. We heard on the video about the Rebbetzin in her own right, the Mechaneches, and all she does on the communal and individual basis. But I've thrown many unique challenges her way in the job that I'm in now over the years. And her reaction has always been with calm and equanimity. It could be a whole speech in its own right, but I want to offer one anecdote to give you an idea. A little more than half a year ago, we planned a big Friday night Suda in our home. Young Balabatim, we invited 30 families. We had 23 families, 90 people for the Friday night Suda in our house. That alone is a crazy thing to throw on my wife. But me being a husband who sometimes doesn't get it. So a few weeks before that, our refrigerator had gone on the blink, and we had ordered a new refrigerator. The old one was 33-inch. She wanted to get a 36-inch. The spot only held 33 inches. So I asked Anthony Zucker Construction to move the wall next to the fridge 4 inches to be able to fit a big refrigerator. Sure, no problem. A few weeks later, on Thursday, a week before this big Suda, he calls up and says, "We're coming Monday." I'm like, "Sure, Monday, you'll be finished by Tuesday." He shows up on Monday, 5 days before the big Suda, and I tell him, "So it's a quick job, you'll be finished on Tuesday, right?" He looks at me, he says, "Tuesday," he says. "You gotta mud it one day, you gotta let it dry, you gotta mud it the second day, you gotta let it dry, you gotta paint it once, you gotta let it dry, you gotta paint it a second paint. This is talking about after Shabbos it'll be ready." I'm like, "I can't deal without a kitchen dish house. We're having a Suda for 90 people in the house." He's like, "This can't be a job for one day." I said, "Anthony, you're gonna have to have the Suda in your house." And he said, "Sure, no problem." It made me feel great because he didn't ask his wife either. So somehow, pulling his magic, as he's wont to do, he finished the job Thursday afternoon. And the kitchen had been pulled apart, put everything back together, and Thursday afternoon, my wife started cooking for 90 people. And anybody who was there will tell you there was nothing lacking from that meal. We're still eating the leftovers. So, Baruch Hashem, suffice it to say that I could not and would not be where I am today without Tzipora at my side. Yasher Koyach. We saw a little bit on the video, we heard a little bit from Rabbi Frank about our arrival in Minneapolis. The warm embrace that we received from this community was unparalleled. The chashivas, the respect, the caring that we were shown made the transition so easy. From the Kabbalah's Panam at the airport, the way the houses were set up with every single need we could think of, all prepared for us before we arrived. When I needed a home 2 years later, when I was left alone across the highway at Park Glen, if we could even remember those days, the Kollel bought me a house to rent, and on and on. But we have to think, what was and what is the purpose of the Kollel? So I'd like to share with you a quick Dvar Torah that I saw from Nissen Kaplan Shlita. He said in the name of his father-in-law, Avram Gurewitz. He asked a question on the laning, the reading of the Torah on the last day of Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach, the culmination of the Exodus from Mitzrayim, and after 7 days, Klal Yisrael is at the Yam Suf, the Reed Sea, and the sea splits, and we cross, and we sing Az Yashir, as Rabbi Frank spoke about. And we read that from the Torah on the seventh day of Pesach. The entire story, leaving Mitzrayim, splitting the sea, walking across, singing the Az Yashir. But the laning doesn't stop there. We continue to read a few more psukim. We read about the fact that Vayelchu shloishes yom b'midbar v'lo yimatzu mayim. Kollel Yisrael traveled 3 days and there was no water, and they complained to Moshe Rabbeinu. And a miracle happened, and they got water. Now the Gemara tells us in Bava Kama that in reality, the Torah is referring to something deeper. Mayim, the water, refers to the Torah. And they had gone 3 days without Torah. And from there we learned that we can't go 3 days without learning Torah. So we learn from the Sefer Torah on Monday, Thursday, Shabbos. Never 3 days without Torah. And the question is, the Marsha asks, how did the Gemara know to take it out of the simple translation? Whatever he answers, but there's got to be some connection between the simple translation, they were lacking water, and complained about that, and the deeper understanding that they were lacking in learning of Torah. So said Avram Gurewitz that the question that bothered the Gemara was, yes, they were lacking water for 3 days, but how could it be after having gone through a Yetzias Mitzrayim and Exodus, and standing at Kriyas Yamsuf and walking through the split sea, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Avdei, they reached such a level of faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could it be that just 3 days later they were complaining and kvetching to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about something that they were lacking? It doesn't make any sense. It can't be just a simple pshat. It must be there's something more. And the fact that they were lacking in learning of Torah for 3 days, that caused them to lose that high level of amunah and faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they had achieved just 3 days before. And the lesson is, and this is why we read it on Pesach. Pesach is just the preview, so to speak, to the Yom Tov of Shavuos that comes after. After going through the days of Sfir, Shavuos is the Yom Tov of accepting the Torah. The last day of Pesach, we highlight the fact that we can achieve great levels of emunah, of faith in Hashem. We can learn Musar, we could become great in midos and character traits. But without the learning and studying of Torah, it's not going to stick. It's not going to be cemented in. It's only the learning of Torah that cements anything that we accomplish in. And this, I believe, is what the Rosh Hashiva Rebellion understood. He understood that if that was true back then, certainly in today's world, it's almost impossible for a person to withstand the trials and the tribulations posed by the society that we live in, unless he has a true and meaningful connection to the study of Torah. And that's what a kollel is. That's what a kollel brings to a community. And the Yeshiva understood that Minneapolis, this community, was a kehillah that could absorb that message, that would be able to take what the kollel has to offer and to use it and to grow with it. And he gave us our marching orders when we left to Minneapolis, to spread that message about the importance of learning Torah through our own learning of Torah. And throughout the years, the kollel has always functioned under those guidelines. But it was only possible because of the type of community that this is. One that appreciated, one that embraced, and one that supported this concept of true, unadulterated limud haTorah. You know, when we moved here, we really had no idea what to expect. Minneapolis was a far-out place. We might have heard the name, barely. We were wondering whether we should put our car on the car carrier or maybe a tractor. We didn't know what to bring. But we found such an unbelievable community, a community with a rich history, built on a foundation of Mesiras Nefesh for Torah, the grandfathers and great-grandfathers, a community that had already attracted some of the next generation of Kollel Yungelite to move back and to continue to make this into a Makom Torah, to a place of Torah. We've come, myself and my wife, to love and to adore this community over the years that we're here. And by now we can't imagine living anywhere else or bringing up our children anywhere else. As the kollel continued to flourish and to grow, other programs were founded at the high schools, at the college, other programs. But the nucleus of the kollel, the full-time learning of the Yungelite, was never compromised for all those programs. But it was also then that the vital partnership between the kollel and the community was underscored. As much as the successful Torah growth of our community can be contributed to the kollel, the success of the programs was only possible because of the amazing community that the kollel is in. I think that Sydney and Mia, with whom I share the stage today, are the perfect example of this. How do a boy and a girl studying in college come in just a few years to the place where they are today, to be regular members of the Beis Yisrael community. Of course, the first contact was through the Kollel, but without a community who opens their homes on a regular basis, so newcomers can experience Shabbos. And sometimes it gets to be Shabbaton with 150 in 1 week, but there's always places for them to stay. Without that, it would not be possible. So it's this community and this Kollel that have this vital relationship. And it's gone on for 18 years, and Be'ezus Hashem, it should go on and continue to grow. My hope and my bracha is that the partnership continue to flourish for many years. As for the exaggerations we heard before in the video, I get the message. The expectations are great. And I hope to be able to live up to those expectations until the day will come when this bastion of Yiddishkeit in this Golus, in this exile, will no longer be necessary with the coming of the Geula of Meir V'Yameinu. Amen.